Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar as part of the Impact Festival. We're delighted to share with you our work as part of the All In for Change programme, and the Change team will be leading this event. Thank you to the Centre for Homeless Impact for this opportunity in their final week of the Impact Festival. First of all, a bit of housekeeping. We would love to hear your comments in the chat box during the webinar, and we'll have time for questions at the end. So if there's anything you'd like to ask any of our speakers, please do send these in, as we're really keen to hear from you. I'd like to introduce our speakers. So we're delighted to have Graham Thompson from the Scottish Government with us today, who was instrumental in setting up All In for Change and has been at one of our retreats. You'll also hear from Davy, Joyce, Deek and Sabrina, who are all change leads, and Shelley, one of the change team facilitators, is here, keeping an eye on the chat and any questions that are coming in. And my name's Vicky and I'm chairing today, and I'm also a change lead, having had lived experience and professional frontline experience in homelessness. We thought we'd start with a bit of background to All In for Change. The programme has at its core bringing experience, knowledge and networks of 30 people with lived experience of homelessness, frontline workers, community activists and academics together. The aim is for these change leads to influence and shape Scotland's approach to ending homelessness. It is facilitated by three organisations: Cyrenians, Homeless Network Scotland and the Scottish Community Development Centre. The change team come together for retreats to share and learn from each other, to listen to different experiences and to understand what is happening on the ground. Change leads communicate change to their networks, and importantly, they feed key messages onto policymakers. We have a few routes for influencing and informing change. First of all, some change leads are members of the Prevention Commission. This plays a critical part in informing the development of recommendations for legal duty on Scottish local authorities and wider public bodies to prevent homelessness. Secondly, other change leads will represent the change team on the Scottish Government's Homeless Prevention and Strategic Group and relay our key messages. We are also part of the Everyone Home, a collective to permanently end rough sleeping and destitution in Scotland as the country emerges from the pandemic, and we have contributed to the recent roadmaps. Lastly, we are regularly asked to sit on government working groups to feedback on recommendations relating to homelessness and speak on webinars. Recent examples of this includes Davy, who's with us today, being a member of a residential rehab working group, which looks at policies around residential rehab services. And we've also been looking at changes to the unsuitable accommodation order. Before we hear from the four change leads, I'd like to introduce Graham Thompson, who works in the homelessness unit of the Scottish Government. Graham was instrumental in setting up the change team, and as part of his remit has the responsibility for supporting our work. Graham, thank you for joining us today and to give us a bit of first-hand background to All In for Change. Can you tell us a bit about why the All In for Change programme was set up and the vision in the early stages?
Thanks very much, Vicky. I think the key to look at is to go back a little bit in time. So I'm going to take you back to autumn 2017 when Scottish ministers set up a homelessness and rough sleeping action group. And they had the job to provide ministers with recommendations to eradicate rough sleeping, transform the use of temporary accommodation, and ultimately to end homelessness. And as part of their work, there was set up an I We Can programme, and that drew on the experience of 425 people with lived experience, which was crucial in developing those recommendations. So when the recommendations came back to ministers in summer of 2018, that the lived experience had played a part in the recommendations, and as a result, HARSAG said they need to play a key part going forward as well. So when we were developing our response within Scottish Government to the HARSAG recommendations, we heard that loud and clear, and very much the very first action we put into our action plan in November, when we published that in November 2018, was to say we want to develop a lived experience programme. and shortly afterwards, the work started that in partnership with Homeless Network Scotland and Sirenians to develop that. I think the key thing that we started with was lived experience, but we quickly realised that lived experience was an important but not all the picture, and we expanded the remit to include those with frontline experience. And in particular, we wanted to capture those people like Vicky, who have both frontline experience and lived experience of homelessness, because they can offer a really key perspective and different perspectives on the same issues to those of us within government. I think that in setting up the change team in the first place, recruitment was absolutely key. So getting the right people involved. And what we have now is a really diverse group of people that bring a whole lot of different experiences, a whole lot of different perspectives, but all with the will to try and do something to help people who are experiencing homelessness. And one of the key things for us was positive attitude. And one of the key sort of pillars for directions that the change team themselves came up with was good vibes. So good vibes is about making sure that the attitude that the members of the change team have flows right through Scottish government, local government, and the whole our whole collective efforts to try to end homelessness and put a really a different spin on the way that homelessness has been dealt with historically. So right at the beginning, we had two main aims for the change team. Firstly, to act as ambassadors for the Ending Homelessness Together action plan that we'd created, and go out and tell people on the front line what that means for them. And to be a critical friend to us within Scottish Government and local government, tell us what is going right, what isn't going right, and how we can change things for the better. And so far, they've done an absolutely fabulous job in helping us get there.
Thank you, Graham. That's great. We'll maybe hear a bit more about that later when the questions start coming in. So we're doing quite good for time. So we'd only had a couple of minutes allocated to everyone, but Davey, you'll be pleased to know you can maybe have a few more minutes because we are doing well for time at the moment. So we're going to turn to the main part of the webinar and hear from our change leads. So first of all, Davey, I'll start with you. What was your motivation for wanting to apply to become a change lead?
My motivation was historically being in and around the user involvement movement, and Vicky, just give me a thumbs up when it's time for me to shut up, because I've got a tendency to go on a bit. But my motivation was, having been somebody that had experienced homelessness for 10 years and being a complex needs client, that intravenous drug user and stuff like that, I found it very, very difficult to shift out homelessness and address the issues that kept me trapped there. And I became an advocate for change really early doors. When I was still using drugs, I set up a homeless users group, Edinburgh, and we challenged the local council to provide better service for homeless people, which they did. You know, and Mike Denny at the time really took us on board and started to use us to deliver and design services for the council. And that was kind of a springboard for me to start getting my life together. And then I worked in homelessness for 10 years, and then I left. You know, I kind of burnt out, and there wasn't a lot of change happening. And competitive tendering had driven wages and quality services into the ground. And really I got back involved by accident through a friend of mine, Peter Anderson, who was working with Homeless Network Scotland, and asked me to do some user involvement with Homeless Network Scotland, and I seen the application for the change team, and I thought it was a really good premise, mixing people with lived experience and people with frontline experience together, because we always talk about the importance of lived experience, but I think frontline workers also have valuable experience to feed into that in terms of their different strengths, disciplines, motivations, and so far, you know, that has been the case for the change team. And I've met fantastic people, and some of them people I didn't expect to connect with, like people in statutory services who I just thought were fucking jobs worse, you know. But anyway, you know, and really connect with them meaningfully, and start to see life from their perspective. You know, when they've got policies and procedures that tie their hands, when they've got competing focuses on trying to help people with limited resources, limited housing, and really trying to understand it from a different perspective, because I always had a kind of singular focus. And then, you know, yeah, so, I mean, for me, I kind of think my motivation was about changing the system for the thing. You know, I see the system as very broken, and you know, people with complex needs are the kind of people that I champion, and I just see the quality of care for them has been decimated over the last 10 years, and I think we need to reinvest in what it is to care for these people and what it is to help them to recreate their lives. And aye, that's my motivation. I don't know if that was 2 minutes. I don't know.
No, that's great, Davey. And I think you're right. So while lived experience is crucial, like my lived experience and the next person's lived experience is only one experience, but frontline workers are sometimes have an overview of lots and lots of different experiences that they can bring. So I think it's important that we have both. And again, your point on sort of statutory services, it's very easy working on the front line or being homeless for it to be very black and white and us against them kind of thing. But once you hear the different perspectives and you see actually people genuinely do care and are trying to get this right, it's easier to try and find a way forward together rather than competing against each other. So brilliant, thank you. And Joyce, the same question to you. So your motivation for applying to be a change lead? Oh, you're on mute, Joyce, sorry. That's you, yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, so I have experience of homelessness myself and also being a frontline worker. And I wanted to make sure that both these voices are included and heard in any debate about policy and change around homelessness. I have a deep interest in policy, so I know that there's been a lot of change in the last 10 years, but that change seems to trickle down. So my motivation was like, okay, let me get involved in the change, being a change lead, and see where we are. There is the block, you know, so that when a new policy is written, my voice and others who have experienced homelessness and also working in the frontline can be included, and we can bring some accountability to it all. My homelessness was 25 years ago, and that time there was still talk about, you know, getting rid of homelessness, and we still have the problem, and if not worse, before the COVID pandemic. So I really want to understand where the difficulties are in implementing change and making sure that I am also part of that change. So yeah, in a nutshell, that is where I get my motivation and to see if I can be part of the change that's going to happen.
Lovely, thank you, Joyce. And Deek, so the same question to you. So your motivation for applying to be a change lead?
Good morning. Well, my motivation was my homelessness journey started in 2001 and ended in 2015, so it's a long time I was homeless. Switching journey began from the Fire in Aberdeen Syrians.
Sorry, Deek, we can't really hear you. Can you maybe go close? Yeah, we'll turn your video off. We'll give that a
Yeah,
go.
can you hear me? Okay, can you hear,
That's
can you hear
better.
me better
Yeah,
now?
yeah. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'll start again. So, morning. So, my homelessness journey started in 2001 and ended in 2015, roughly. So it was like 14 years I was homeless. So my change lead journey began in a couple of years ago when I was in Aberdeen Slinians visiting, because that was my social work drop-in, about a seminar in Aberdeen about homelessness in Scotland. So I went along to the meeting, met some change leads and got inspired about their passion for changing homelessness in Scotland for the better. Quite simply, I've had to say I joined because I wanted to give something back. I feel I've taken so much things out of life due to my addictions and homelessness, especially my addictions, that now I'm clean, thankfully. I'm not homeless anymore. It's time to help the change team with working towards our goal of ending homelessness in Scotland forever. I think the northeast of Scotland is not always good represented, so I'm proud that I can bring an Aberdeen perspective to the table. Being homeless in 3 different countries, Belgium, Holland and Scotland, made me realise that Scotland, there are so many networks available to people with addiction and homelessness issues compared to Holland and Belgium. Through my recovery journey, I have learned so much. Now it's time to utilise my past experiences and help people on their journey of recovery. I feel that I'm in a privileged position because after all, we are all doing this to make a change to our country. So was that 2 minutes?
No, yes, that's lovely, Deek. Thank you. Yes, so Deek brings invaluable insight because of his international experience of homelessness. And also your point about the Northeast not always being represented. So I think the change team's been good in that there's been a real effort to include more diverse locations in Scotland, you know, more rural locations rather than say the meetings being held in Edinburgh or Glasgow and it largely being made up of people from the immediate area. So, and probably having the meetings on Zooms made that a bit easier, you know, because you've not had to travel so far and stay overnight beforehand. So, yeah.
I didn't mind that. So.
Lovely. Thank you, Deek. And last but not least, Sabrina.
Hello. I decided to join because I lead a coalition that is called Away Home Scotland, and we try to prevent and end youth homelessness in Scotland. We are lucky enough that we have partners like the Scottish Government and we have other public bodies, but we also have amazing youth workers and frontline workers from charities and third sector organizations. But the more I traveled across the country to meet partners or deliver workshops, to attend conferences, and the more I saw the gap and I felt a disconnect between the policy and decision makers at the national and local level with people delivering and using the services. And I also realized that whilst the majority of people within the sector understand that young people are at an increased disadvantage and they are at highest risk of experiencing homelessness, they don't fully understand the extent of it. So together with a member of our youth group After Streets, we decided to join because we felt that our values aligned with the values of the change team, and because we felt that we could be part of a group of committed and passionate and dedicated people who, like us, felt that change was long overdue, but that we also understood that despite the disconnection and the failures in the system and the unacceptable realities that many people have to go through, we could still be part of a group that is really not afraid to take up new challenges. And it's a group that is really willing to listen, to truly listen to people. And it was a group that knew since the beginning that this was going to be a long journey and still embarked upon it. So I wanted to apply because I think it was important for young people, and I wanted to apply to just be part of the change team. And then I ended up becoming part of a movement. And so I couldn't be prouder of that.
Lovely, thank you, Sabrina. Yeah, and it's great you've got that perspective on youth homelessness, because often youth homelessness and women's homelessness and other sort of demographics get forgotten about because of the image that people tend to have of homelessness in their mind. So it's great to have other sort of demographics represented at the Change team. Right, so Davey, I'll come back to you. What is the key message about the Change team that you would like to share? You're on mute, sorry, Davey.
Cheers. It sounds like an easy question to answer. What's the key message? You know, but there's for me, the problem that we face is very, very complex. You know, and I think that what the Change team has taught me is that together we're stronger than the individual parts of the system. You know, and what I mentioned earlier about the kind of competitive tendering and where that's left service provision siloed and competing against each other for bits of funding and stuff. And if we can kind of move away from that and start to kind of come in together as a force for change and as a force to try and help the guy in the street that doesn't have any hope in life, to realise that he can both be he can both reach his full potential in life and, you know, be an active part of society. You know, I think that's important, you know, because one of the biggest obstacles in my change over the years was fear, you know, and also as well as fear, it was I didn't really understand fully how close getting out of that system or getting out of that way life was. And I always thought it was a million miles away until I'm back from the journey, you know, and then I realised that it wasn't as complex as my mind had made it to be, you know, and so it's about change. That's my main message. You know, I've witnessed some incredible change in my journey along the path since I become involved in Change team. I'm a member of the Glasgow Alliance to End Homelessness, you know, which is Glasgow Council's give its third sector budget to a group of voluntary sector organisations to try and work in partnership to end homelessness in Glasgow, which is one of the biggest local authorities in the UK. And that kind of stuff enthuses me because it's like we're moving away from that old system and just managing people's chaos, and we're actually looking at how do we help these people that are stuck self-actualize as human beings and become whatever they want to be. I want to say a citizen. Everybody wants to be a citizen. What is a citizen? You know, I mean, that's the vaguest of terms that you can have. And so, you know, I've been on my journey, and you know, I've survived up to now, you know, and I just want to open up the road so that everybody else can have a similar journey, because the distance that they need to travel in their mind is completely different to how close they are to exiting homelessness, exiting the complexities, exiting all that stuff. And we just need to be a better conduit to help that to happen. You know? Hope that's answered the question and not just went off on a usual tangent that I do.
No, that's great, Davey. Thank you. You always have amazing insights and are really good at kind of bringing your personal experience into the conversation with passion. So thank you. And Joyce, so the key message that you would like to share about the Change team?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, these are in two aspects. First of all, is that how the Change team must be representative and inclusive all the time. Speaking from my own experience as someone from an African community and being homeless and working the front line, it's not the same type of experiences that others might have. And we cannot just have one fit all, one size fit all. So it is important that voices, we're hearing people. And I work also for a project called People First, and that's what it is. And the change team kind of links in with that type of concept. We have to understand that we put people first. The labels that we attach to people, they're not helpful. So if we can work towards eliminating change and having inclusive voice, making sure that those who have experienced homelessness, their voices are being included when policies are being made, and also in everyday setting. I mean, in terms of those who are working, whether they're decision makers in projects, and hearing as well from what the frontliners are saying that can really have an impact on the how we provide services. I think it is also important to make sure that the change team, what we are doing now, it's because it's a national project. So as Sabrina said, a national movement, we should, the policymakers have to hear what we are saying, So I'm happy that at the moment, Scottish government is listening to people's voices. So those things have to, it's not good enough to just make policies that when it comes to implementation, it's difficult to implement them. And most of it in my mind is because we've neglected those voices, that people who have got the experiences. So the change team is a movement that we want to see that we're going to try and end homelessness, or to make sure that if people are homeless, services respond fast and in an efficient way. The other thing I want to mention, I also sit on a prevention commission, which was born out of the change team. So we look at the policies that government policies that are coming through. As you know, most of the wording is full of jargon. So we try and make sure that the message is made in a way that people can understand it. But also we question some of those policies, and we add a voice to those policies as well, making recommendation on how government can change the policy in terms of having people's voices heard. So I can say we are making change, but it's too early for us to say this is what the change team has achieved so far. And unfortunately, with the COVID pandemic, it kind of delayed the most of things that we wanted to do. Like we planned for a roadshow, which we couldn't do. But at least having Graham, coming to our meetings is very important, because now we can see that I think if we work hand in hand with government, we will be able to make change. If Sweden can do it, definitely Scotland can do it. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Joyce. And yeah, I think the Prevention Commission's been really key in sort of being critical of policies and feeding that back to the government, as well as trying to offer some sort of solutions and resolutions, rather than being purely critical. It's to find a way of navigating that. Thank you. And Deek, so the key message you would like to share about the change team, please.
I suppose the most important thing that I've noticed about being involved in this passionate, inspirational team, it's for me, it works in a two-way situation. I get so much out of it, but I also feel the team benefit from my past experiences. So I feel like my experience and contribution is valued, and that I can give something back. And although I didn't get much of an education, I have a lot of knowledge that I can hopefully make a difference to ending this homelessness carry-on. One example was that I had a Zoom call with Kevin Stewart recently, the Housing Minister, which was fantastic. and I felt he really listened and wanted to hear about my views and experiences. This felt amazing to have the ear of the Housing Minister listen to what I had gone through and taken back to Holyrood to influence policy that he may be involved in writing. It was a positive chat, I felt. But I also get many personal benefits from being involved in this team as well. I feel I'm being helpful, that I can be part of something, and I feel valued. The routine, especially, and the structure really helps me my recovery and supports my mental health very much. I have especially valued this during lockdown when my gym and church have been closed and I haven't got the same social support I normally would get. I now see my role as a change lead as a job. To be honest, at the start, I didn't think I brought enough to the table. I wondered what my input really was. I got the train to Falkirk a couple of times and stayed in a hotel, which was nice for the night. I went to 2 retreats, but I was judging myself, still a little bit lacking of confidence at the time, asking what I'm bringing here. That has changed now. My confidence has grown the last few months due to my involvement with the team, and I've came into my own and more comfortable with sharing my experiences and my traumas from the past. I can now see why my experience is important. I value this opportunity to be a change lead.
Thank you, Deek. That's brilliant. And I think, yeah, it's been important to the change team to have Scottish Government sort of being visible within our discussions. So as I said before, having Graham along to one of our retreats and the Housing Minister, Kevin Stewart, at our launch, but also in discussions with the change team and facilitating a crossover with the change team and the HARSAG group. So I think that's been key and really valuable to both the change team and to the Scottish Government equally.
Well, it's getting the message across, is it?
Yes, yes, exactly, yeah. And Sabrina, so a key message about the change team that you'd like to share?
I think I agree with what Joyce said, that maybe it's too early for us to change, that change is possible, but trying, that is possible. And I think that's what we are trying to do here. As a group, we don't have all the answers. And as a matter of fact, I don't think we've actually asked all the questions just yet. But I think that's what's great about it, that we can be honest enough, we can be open enough to say where we would like to get, and just to admit that in many cases, we don't know how to get there. But I think this journey has to start with people that have different skills and experiences and voice and thoughts and views. And together we really just try to overcome our own prejudice and preconceptions. And we try to create these conversations that really challenge our own views or expand upon them or enrich them. And I know that sometimes when I talk about the change team with other colleagues, it sounds a bit naive or it sounds a bit cheesy, but that doesn't mean that we get along all the time. We do have different opinions. I think it just means that we take the time to create a space that feels safe enough to be seen and to be heard and to be respected. And of course, it all comes with massive challenges, and the pandemic has disrupted many of the plans that we had. But because that's a group that it's made with people and around people, then it changes when the needs of people change. So I think that my message here is that the change team has challenged me as an individual and as a representative of an organization. And I think that's okay. Change can be such a powerful thing. And to be involved in a project like this, where its beginning and its end are both shaped by a diverse group of people, can only give back that sense of agency that some of us have lost. So to be really in tune with our colleagues and our fellow citizens, or even the government, we really need to be seen as people first. And that's when that happens, you have change. So I don't know if that's what we are doing, but I definitely can say that that's what we are trying to do.
That's great, Sabrina. Yeah, and I think while we are openly and able to be critical of you know, the government and of policies, we also can be critical of ourselves and of each other. And, you know, there are differences of opinion or different priorities, but we've never fell out, you know. And I always, well, me personally, I always leave the retreats either learning something new or having my mind changed about something that I believe to be true. So I think it's great that we've got that place to have open discussion, but also to be inwardly critical as well, and to see where the limitations are so that we can try and improve on them. Brilliant. So back to you, Graham. I'd like to ask, what happens to the key messages and the reports that the change team feed up to the Scottish Government?
Thanks, Vicky. Before I directly answer that, I just want to say thank you to everyone. I thought that those insights you gave, different perspectives, was really valuable. I think that shows the real strength of the change team overall, that each one of you gave different answers, addressed different perspectives, and really gave insight into yourselves and to the change team in general. And I've found it really fascinating, and I hope that everyone else that's watching did too. I guess to respond to your question, the first place I'd start, Vicky, is with the Homelessness Prevention and Strategy Group. Now that's our main national group that deals with steering the direction of the homelessness programme in Scotland. It is chaired by our housing minister and by the COSLA counterparts. For those that don't know, COSLA is the representative of the 32 local authorities in Scotland, so the equivalent of the English Local Government Association. And they and brings together third sector partners, local government, national government, and a range of different perspectives. And that's where the voice of the change team has been great. We've now created a space and standing agenda items for the change team to come along and talk to us. And I know that from everyone that attends that strategy group, that when whoever comes on from the change team for that meeting, they are listening intently to it. And in particular, our housing minister is a big fan. Deek talked about the direct conversation that he'd had with the housing minister. He has a connection in terms of being an Aberdonian. So our housing minister is a proud Aberdonian, and representing the Northeast is a really good thing. And so I know that he values that your contribution there, Deek. But also what the minister says is that the change team tell him things that nobody else does. So I'm going to cite a particular example of that. Recently, it was brought up that there's an issue or a problem with the stigmatisation of particular areas in Scotland in communities. And it was the change team that brought that, and they brought that to the HPSG, and the minister is still citing that in meetings that he's having with other people since then. So I use that as an example, just a specific example of how the impact is felt right throughout government. I think from an official's point of view, what it does is tell the change team give us is they tell us things, most importantly, about connections with other policy areas, so that go beyond homelessness. So Davey talked about his own experiences of homelessness, and in particular his work on rehabilitation that he's going to be working on. I think that our connections with colleagues in the health sector and the making the connections with mental health, with addictions policy, really, really important if we're going to end homelessness altogether. I think that during COVID, the change team overall has changed a little bit. They've had to adapt, as have we all in society, and they've done brilliantly at doing so. I think that that one main aim early on of the change team to get out there and sort of sell the messages of what we're trying to do across the country. Unfortunately, that hasn't been able to materialise in practice because of COVID and the way that we would have liked it to happen. But they've adapted accordingly, and actually are, from a national point of view, they're giving us much more direct input and insight into what we should do, what we have to do to respond to COVID, and how we move past into the next phase. And they've done that with our reconvened Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Action Group. They've done it directly with us, and they've done it directly with the Minister. I'd also just talk about the Prevention Commission as a really good example of policy in practice. Joyce talked about that, and how there was two main things to do there. They have a key role in questioning policies. If we are going to get a policy right in the first place, we need to be told what we need to do. And then when we come up with a policy, we need to be told that isn't right because, and by that's the role that the change team can and do play. I think that Sabrina reflected, I don't know, the change team sometimes don't know how to get there all the time. Frankly, I'm going to make an admission to you, neither does Scottish Government sometimes. We don't always know how to get to places, and that's why we very much view the change team and our wider strategic partners as very much that. We can only do this collectively and not as individuals or even groups of people. And the other thing I wanted to pick up on was what Joyce said about representation. I think that we've got it right at the heart of our action plan is that people. We want people first. We have a person-centered approach. What that means in practice is sometimes a little bit different from what is the ideal. So how do you, when we have, at the moment, we have 14,000 people that are currently living in temporary accommodation of some sort in Scotland. How do we create a solution that works for each individual one of those? Now, at national level, we can't. At local level, the frontline workers that work with those individuals can, and they can make a difference. And that's where the key thing that we need to overcome and what we're trying to do, and that how the change team can really support us in helping that to happen. I'll stop there because I could just ramble on for ages, as I'm very much like Davy there. So I'll stop and hand back to you, Vicky.
Thanks, Graham. I think you've inadvertently answered all the questions I had in my mind to ask you. Apart from one, I was wondering what your feelings are about the change team going on for a longer sort of period of time, you know.
Yeah, I said that right at the beginning that we would set up a lived experience programme to support the delivery of the action plan. Now, the delivery of our action plan, it doesn't specifically say in our action plan how long it will take. Ultimately, the ultimate aim is to end homelessness. So we're not going to do that tomorrow, I'll be honest. So when our, how long do we need a change team for? For as long as we're working to end homelessness. So I want the change team to continue to grow and to continue to expand their influence, to continue to be a powerful advocate for what we're trying to do, but also the words I said at the beginning, be a critical friend to us. And that will continue for over the next few years. I think that having that voice of lived experience and frontline workers is absolutely key to everything we do, and the way that the change team have embedded themselves so much right at the heart of everything we're doing or trying to do is a great thing, and one that I want to capitalise on in the years ahead.
Lovely, thanks very much, Graham. And I think I'll head over to Shelley now to see if there's any questions for the panel.
Yeah, we've got some really interesting questions. There's just one comment that I'd like to just share with everybody on the webinar and the panel to start with, and it came from Graham Lamont that just said the best thing about having people with lived experience in the change team is their authentic voice, because it provides for services feedback that ordinarily they would not get. We mustn't ever polish or refine that voice. We mustn't ever be afraid of feedback. Indeed, we should embrace it. Well done to the change team for doing this, and let's do more. So I think we can, we can dine out on that before we get some of these gritty questions. One person just asked a quick question, which I'll just answer myself, about whether people are paid or volunteers. And just to say that everybody who's a change team, what's a change team, is paid in some capacity. So that might be somebody who already works for an organisation, and their organisation kind of gift their time to the change team. If somebody's not working and they're bringing different sorts of experience, they're paid a living wage. So everybody is paid and valued for sort of the experience and the time that they give. There is another part of that question, but I'll just, so one of the questions that we were asked was around co-production, and we're really keen at the team that we have the Scottish Community Development Centre as one of the 3 partners, and that's really their expertise. So we've got this kind of checking going on all the time around co-production. I suppose, the way we see it is that we see this team as we're sharing power. We're kind of trying to sort of address some of those power imbalances that can so often sort of slip into work within frontline homeless services, and we kind of all value and celebrate and share the different skills that we bring, and we're very sort of person-based program. That's our goal. We're always working on this, but that's our goal. And the question was around co-production, the change team. What's the most challenging aspect of co-production, and how do you overcome that? And rather put anybody on the spot, I primed Sabrina to be having a little bit of a think about that. So I'm going to hand over Sabrina to say, what's the challenge for us around co-production, and how do we overcome that?
So first of all, I agree with everything that you said, that we are just trying to overcome those power imbalances. I think in general, co-production can be such a slippery concept. And I don't feel that within the change team, we really use that word, because maybe if we move away from that label, we just feel like we are working together in a sensible way. But I feel that there are some issues with co-production, because when you want to have a group, it needs to be accessible. So we've already explored the problems around language, and that comes because people, again, have different experiences and skills. But I think in the change team, we don't just want to have the luxury of assuming that people know everything other people discuss. And especially when we talk about policy and legislation, it can be such a confusing language that we just have to make sure that we take that responsibility on, so that we don't leave people confused, that we don't put them in a corner where they wouldn't feel comfortable asking questions. And of course, it needs to be fair and it needs to be equal. And I feel that maybe we still have some work to do on that, to ensure that we have some other groups and some other voices represented. But I think one of the most important aspects, and maybe because I get to work a lot with young people, is that the aspect of reciprocity. So people want to get something back for putting something in. And I feel that what we are doing here today, that's just the best example of that. Of course, getting paid, it's also fantastic. But I think sometimes what it feels is that people want to be involved, but they don't get to see the end product of a project they were asked to be involved in. So I see that all the time with young people, where they are asked to do a survey or they're asked to get interviewed, and it can be that they get paid, but sometimes maybe they're not part of that conversation. So they get asked those questions, but they don't know what happens with their answers. They don't get to see if they turn into a policy or a guidance or a set of recommendations. So I think it's quite important that we make sure that we build a movement that it's around this concept. So I think that's where we actually feel seen and valued. And it can be quite challenging, because we all come with different skills and experiences. And sometimes in these environments, there are people with a certain experience, and you can have a sense of hierarchy. And we are definitely trying to move away from that. So of all the challenges, create a movement where people can have a meaningful involvement. For me, it's definitely the most challenging aspect, and something that we are trying to overcome. And as I said earlier, it doesn't mean that we have the answers, but when we have conversations, we keep challenging ourselves and we keep asking these questions, so that we can create this empowering environment and this platform where people can safely share their views and thoughts.
Thank you, Sabrina. That's a very coherent answer, and I'm glad you answered that. It was lovely. We've had a question from David Riley, and everybody on the panel will recognise David Riley because he was one of the facilitators for the All In for Change team and brought a really kind of sort of a strong vision around co-production. So this is a nice segue into this question. And Graham, it's for you, if this is okay. It's asking what advice you would give to people in government thinking, in brackets nervously, about involving people with lived experience in the development of policy. What values and resources, from your perspective, do you think are important?
Well, the good thing is that I already have conversations with other people across government about the value of the change team and how that, if it's done in the right way, set up in the right way, they can be really utilised in a really important way in terms of policy development. I think that to pick up on some of the stuff that Sabrina said about not having people find out what the end of the policy is. I think if you think about the policy making journey, you've got we want the change team to be involved before we start doing a policy or implementing something in practice. Be there during it and tell us how it's going, and then tell us afterwards what needs to change, and then go right back to the beginning. So therefore, if you utilize anyone within that can give that different perspective, so with lived experience or frontline, then they can help to do that. And that is absolutely key to, if you're going to do that in any part of government at all. But what you really need to do is have that commitment, and I mean commitment to accept that you might get told things that you don't like, have ministers that are prepared to listen to what they get told that they don't like, and for us potentially have to go back to those that tell us something on the change team and tell us why we can't do what they say. Now, that isn't always comfortable. It's not necessarily an easy conversation, but that, in my mind, is co-production in reality. And there's that two-way dialogue and communication, and it becoming not just a two-way thing, but becoming a continuous loop on an ongoing basis. I hope that answers the question, David.
David Pentland's just left his seat, and I'm hoping he's going to answer this next question, but he's back, so we're all good. So this is a question from Robin Johnson, which I think is probably something that's sort of critical to all of us, that quite often services that are set up for people, sort of homelessness services, are not putting, they're not sort of putting the heart, they're not putting those who, the services that they're supporting, they're not putting those people at the heart of the decision making. So I'll just read out this question, and David Pentland's going to have a stab at answering this. So Robin says, the way we have provided services these last 20 years or so with commissioners setting up contracts that specify what they want services to do, what the outcomes they want, are often designed where we don't have the person who they're supporting at the heart of that service. So Davy, this is something that I think is quite close to your heart, that what can we do in practice in Scotland to counteract or even reverse this tendency?
I think one of the biggest strengths of the change team, and I think it's been remiss of us that we've not really mentioned it up to now, is our critical link with iSphere and looking at what the current trends are and what actually works on the ground across the UK. And we've been really fortunate to have access to most of their research material. And I think for individuals who work in service who are kind of shackled by maybe different policies or and sometimes it's outcomes. Sometimes services are that overpowered by outcomes that they just respond to outcomes. You know what I mean? And whether or not that hits the remit of what the service user needs can be immaterial, because the funding is dependent on them hitting outcomes. And I think it's almost it's important, you know, to have that conversation and be looking at the stuff that iSphere's doing and they match that up with the work that you're doing on the ground and be saying, is there a tally here? Or are we completely in the wrong direction and just meeting all these outcomes and meeting funders' requirements and missing the point of what's needed on the ground? And certainly, I thought I knew a lot about complex needs until I met the iSphere team, and then they taught me a whole lot more about what statistically life on the ground is really like for people that are homeless, and actually what works. You know, because I mean that's the important thing, isn't it? About what we think. It's important what we think and what experience it is, but what the most important thing is, what actually works in practice on the ground to alleviate homelessness in Scotland.
Thank you, David. And just literally, we've got a few minutes left, but I wanted to turn to Joyce because I think Joyce's experience is critical for this question as well, around how the people we're supporting, their voices are at the heart of the services that we're running. I wonder if you had a little bit more to say about that, Joyce.
I think if we look at what's been done, like for example, with the Mayday Trust, you know, it's having those conversations with the commissioners, because they're also people. I mean, these are not, you know, set in stones, and people can change. And indeed, our services are really damaging to people. If you can look at the wisdoms that even in Scotland, we've started gathering the wisdom from the streets. It's the message is the same from people saying they are not included in these decision making. So we need to put people at the heart of services rather than chasing outcomes. I know it's difficult for projects because they have to fulfill the outcomes. So those conversations still needs to happen. And I feel this one needs to come from top. So the funders and staff, they need to start looking at how they're funding projects, you know, so that those voices are heard, and together we can.
That sounds lovely. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Vicky now because we're coming to the end of the webinar. But I'm going to thank Vicky because Vicky has been the chair today and sort of keeping us all in order and keeping us all together. So Vicky, thank you for doing a lovely job, and I'm handing over to you.
Oh, thank you. No, it's been a pleasure, and thank you to the Centre for Homelessness Impact. It's been really lovely because we've been meeting for so long. It's like being on a webinar with a group of friends. So it's been really nice. So yeah, thank you to all of the panelists and to Graham for joining us today, and to Shelley for fielding the questions. You can Google us. So if you Google All In for Change Team Scotland, then you will get a link to our page if you'd like to find out some more information and get in touch with us. We'd be really happy to hear from you. So thank you, everyone. Thanks.